growing talk about a quote-unquote Trump trade, stocks or sectors that would benefit from the election of former President Trump. Following the political violence we saw over the weekend, how do you view that so-called Trump trade and this increasing support and sentiment that Mr. Trump may have an increasing lead in this election?
Well, good morning, Frank. Markets trade on sentiment all the time, of course, but I'd caution people against a Trump trade being real because, the betting and prediction markets are much ballyhooed on Wall Street, but in this case, they bear no resemblance to what's going on actually on the ground. You've had a tight race between Trump and Biden over the last month. Even after all Biden's difficulties over the last month, you've only got a situation where Trump has gone from +1 to +3 in the last month. And, that's a situation that's within the margin of error of most of the polls that are being sampled. So, the political reality here is a lot more circumspect than the betting market's reality. I'd expect that condition to continue for quite some time.
All right, Ben, I'm going to come over to you. You are looking at some of the odds when it comes to this election. You gave us some data. There's a 70% chance now that former President Trump will win the election. When you're talking to your clients or generally looking at the markets right now, do you see a short-term or maybe even a medium, long-term case to shift to this so-called Trump trade?
Good morning, Frank. Yeah, I think it's really a sentiment change, as Terry says, because really about the probabilistic outcome of this election, and markets just like certainty. And when as horrific as this event has been, markets take it like it becomes more and more certain that it likely will be President Trump who wins the election. Now, whether he will win the election or not, that remains to be seen, with echoing Terry's comments. But for markets, it's just discounting the probabilistic outcome. So you're getting this Trump trade back, which means the equity futures are up, particularly Russell 2000 is up. You see the dollar being stronger, yields a bit up, and that's all that sort of effect about what does this mean for the economy? Likely more stimulus, tax cuts, and ultimately tariffs. But initially, it's a positive reaction. So I think it's that sentiment that's driving the markets this morning.
That sentiment is largely based on the idea of Mr. Trump being reelected. But Terry, I'm going to come back to you. According to your data, there's actually a 70% chance, just a coincidence, the numbers are similar, a 70% chance of split control of the White House and Congress. So as you're seeing that as the most likely outcome, is there a way for investors to play that so-called split White House and Congress?
Sure. Generally speaking, what you got, Frank, is a situation that's kind of a remixed status quo, and that's good and bad. What you got is a situation where, Congress is as important or more important than the president in setting policy. So all this business about Trump baskets and Biden baskets alone doesn't really cut it. But in a split Congress, what you're going to have is still difficulties with fiscal debt and deficit. You're going to have a increase in defense almost no matter what happens, but I think it'll be a little more pronounced on Trump's side. And you're going to have a situation where unless there is one-party Republican control in Washington, top to bottom, what you're going to have is a situation where the tax cuts in 2025 expire, and investors can play that as well.
All right, so you're looking ahead to some of the possible policy if there is a split White House and Congress. But I want to talk about just the short-term and immediate-term impact. Looking at the price of Bitcoin, looking at the dollar. Over the last couple of months, we've had a lot of geopolitical issues. Terry, I'm going to come back to you on this. Do you see any short-term opportunities to get into Bitcoin and maybe invest in currency? I mean, if you're an investor looking for an opportunity, I want to bottom line it. Where would you put money to work at right now due to all this uncertainty and the possibility of volatility going forward?
Well, with the caveat that I'm not a financial advisor. I will say that there's an awful lot of smoke and mirrors around the resuscitation of Bitcoin and digital currency in Washington. I find that all to be very premature. So, I would be looking at more traditional assets than going into those markets.
Understood. Ben, I'm going to give you the last word. I know you're looking at a variety of different commodities that you think may be a short-term opportunity right now. I also want to get your take on the recent rise of Bitcoin following this assassination attempt.
You can always look for an alternative. And so Bitcoin, I guess, really gets a bit here, partly because Trump has put his support behind Bitcoin, too. And it just picks it up that way. But I think it's also about what happens now from here with gold, because that's such an instrument of uncertainty. It's notable that gold was actually not up this morning. So again, I think markets are taking this like, as much as this event was really terrible and horrific, On the other hand, it doesn't really create any real uncertainty for markets because they're seeing this economic outcome from President Trump being potentially the president. So the uncertainty away just lifts all boats, and you can see that in other commodity markets. So, for example, in metals, they're not only up because of what's happening with here on the ground, but it's also because of China weaker, that people expect potential stimulus out of China. So I think a combination altogether gives us this risk on feel this morning.